Paul Richards, Talking Adelaide on 1395 5AA.
I've talked in large sort of gross terms about fear and the way, for example, you might see a company or a politician use fear as a method of control. History is littered with it. But we do that to ourselves all the time, every day. Every day in some way we're working from a place of pleasure or fear. We're trying to avoid or we're trying to gain. And a lot of us don't really have insight into how fear and anxiety, we know anxiety, we get that. We know, we understand when we feel anxious, but it's fear that drives it often. It's a lack of control that drives it. It's why we get ticked off. It's why we get upset. It's why we don't find a clear path. There must be an easier way than that to live as adults. You'd think we would have learned. The Loudest Guest is a terrific book by my next guest, which is Dr. Amy Silver. The Loudest Guest, How to Change and Control Your Relationship with Fear. Let's get her on now. You're not nervous or fearful, are you, coming on the radio by any chance, Amy?
I am always fearful, always nervous, but I push on through sometimes. I think that's the thing that we all need to learn, don't you? That fear is here to stay. It's something that we carry around with us. And, it's so exciting to get the chance to talk to you about it.
Let's talk not only about your book, but fear itself. Fear is one of the major driving forces we have, but I don't think that many of us actually think of ourselves as fearful. But I would argue if you really dug enough, you'd find that you are fearful. I think that most people are driven in some respects by fear. Is that true to you?
Yeah, I think it is. It's one of our base emotions. So we are, and part of our survival, as you said, is due to the fact that we have fear. It's a sort of a human evolutionary piece that we are and have learned to look out for fears and to become conscious of them in some way. But what they do is they end up controlling us. And if we don't understand that piece of ourselves, what we can do is we can travel through our lives thinking that we've chosen our world and our choices are within our control. But sometimes when we start to unpack it, we realize that some of the choices we're making are due to fear. So
the defense mechanisms that we as just regular people use to cover things up, because it's uncomfortable actually addressing fear. It's as you know, it's an uncomfortable thing. And some people would, myself included sometimes in the past especially, don't even want to recognize it because it's too unpleasant. So we'd rather rationalize it with some fiction. And like you've just expressed there, what happens when why do people suddenly say, oh, hang on, I am fearful? Would it be reading your book that would do that, or what?
Yeah.
How do people get insight?
It's funny, actually. A lot of people are reading the book and saying, wow, I didn't realize I had so many fears that were making choices for me without my consent. I think what we recognize most of the time is avoidance. Like if we're avoidant of certain social situations, or speaking in front of certain people, or putting our hand up for opportunities. If we're avoidant, I think that's when we're sort of conscious that fear may be getting in our way. Although you do see people who, just sort of label themselves as shy or, quiet, and actually fear may be a big driver there. So I think avoidance is something that a lot of us recognize, but there's also a whole heap of irritation, frustration, anger, and that's the fight and flight responses that we know are associated with fear. I think that.
I alluded to that at the start, that if you don't feel in control, you can get irritable and angry. And you're suggesting then that it's actually fear that drives that.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of our frustrations and anger is completely directed by fear, and fear is the first thing that happens for us as humans, and then we may layer on anger or defensiveness. But what fear is always trying to do is trying to protect us. It's trying to keep us safe. It's got a really strong job to do. But it can very quickly, if it feels that we are being threatened or we're under threat, it will either avoid or it will arc up, and that's the anger piece. It's sort of, well, I'll lash out, or I'll defend, or I'll blame, or I'll push it elsewhere because it's nothing to do with me.
You're singing a song that I know a lot of the words to, actually, because I used to be involved in psychiatry a lot and was part of the response team to Code Black incidents where someone would be acting out. And it was always my theory, and that's where I worked from, is the aggressor generally is scared. I always, and I still maintain that there is some degree of fear with anyone who's aggressive. I could be wrong, but that's always been my experience. Amy, what experiences would people be having? The people listening right now say, I'm not fearful. What might some symptoms be to suggest that they actually are?
I think if people feel anything like, there's so many things. There's doubt and there's worry, as you say, there's stress. There's FOMO, worrying about making the wrong decision. There's all those sorts of, I guess, things that are on the edge often of our consciousness. Then there's actually what we need to do is think about what our goals are, because sometimes our goals have been reduced by fear, so that we may want, for example, that job promotion, we may want that relationship, we may want that relationship with our children or with other people. We may want to have that difficult conversation. We may want all these things that we know is going to push us further in our life, but something seems to be getting in the way. So I think it's a good thing to think about is, am I achieving my potential? Because if I'm not, I'd really love to help people to examine whether that's fear inhibiting their potential and what they could do.
Yeah, Jerry's just written in what's, they've spelled it differently, but FOMO, Jerry's fear of missing out, Jeremy. Fear of missing out is the little doodad there, and a lot of us have that too. Your book has a quiz. There's a quiz on your website as well with regards to, are you suffering from fear? Yeah. And I did it. And I was,
oh, you did?
Oh, good Lord. Yeah, I'm going to get your book.
Look, I think the journey of this book and the journey that I would love people to go on is changing their relationship with fear, because I think that a lot of the time we fear itself. We don't actually know what to do with it when it shows up.
Well, that's why we cover it up. That's why we rationalise.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And that's why we've got all sorts of things like imposter syndrome and not wanting to tell people that we love them and not wanting to have anything that puts us where we think is vulnerable. But actually, if we made friends with fear and said, hey, look, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to protect me from getting hurt. You're trying to protect me and keep me safe. And thank you for that. But I'm going to use the really clever part of my brain, not the primitive part of the brain, which is where fear comes from. I'm going to use a really clever part of my brain to go, hey, I've been given a warning, but do I really want to listen to it? Or is that actually going to take me further away from my goals? So that's the journey that I'd love people to take is actually turning towards it and making friends with their fear rather than being frightened of it.
You said something very interesting right at the start. The first thing you said was you're always fearful. This is the author of a book about fear. And I don't suppose that's really a surprise, but it kind of is in some ways. Describe that. You always have fear. Is that correct?
I always have fear, and I think all of us always have fear. It's how in touch we are with the usefulness of it. So you said at the beginning, there are some places, organizations, people, relationships that use fear to get the best out of us, and so there is a place for positive relationship with fear. And I think that, the book is called The Loudest Guest because I think of fear as a guest at my party, but there are heaps of other guests. There's hope and there's excitement and there's joy and there's all these different guests. And if fear is the loudest guest, it can tell me what to do. It just directs my choices and it takes over. I don't want fear to be the loudest guest. I am the host of my party, not any of one of my guests. And so I want fear to take a back seat. It's more than welcome to give me its 2 cents, and tell me what's going on from its perspective.
Sure.
But I also want to listen to excitement because the physical feelings of excitement are the same as the physical feelings of fear. So if I can tune into what excitement thinks, maybe I can get a full spectrum conversation going on in my head and I don't have to be purely directed by fear.
Well, there you go. Now, Jennifer's rung up, and we're not really talking about specific fear, or maybe we are. What if someone's got a specific fear with regards to, I know you and I, first of all, I just want to make it very clear that we're talking about the fears that we carry all the time that direct our behaviours. I understand that. But Jennifer's frightened of, I know we're not talking about this, okay, but Jennifer's frightened of spiders.
Yeah.
You got any advice for that?
I do.
Okay, well, can Jennifer, can I let Jennifer join the call?
Of course.
Yep, all right, let's bring her on. Jennifer, you now are on the air as well. How are you, Jennifer?
Yeah, good, thanks. But I do have a terrible fear of spiders. Honestly, if I get up in the morning and I see the tiniest spider, I just withdraw really badly.
Okay, well, there you go, Doc. You're on.
Well, in the book, I've actually got a case study because that was my first patient back in the days when I was doing therapy. That was my first patient was a spider phobic, and the technique that you use to move somebody through a specific phobia, and it is really similar for spider phobia, for needle phobia, which will become a big thing when we get to the immunization for COVID. There's a whole host of very specific phobias that there's a very neat way to move through it. Now, the trick is, Jennifer, is that you're probably going to need somebody to support you to do that, because the game that we need to play is to set up what we call a graded approach, where we take where you are now, and meeting a spider and having it kind of near you is a number 10, and we want to work out what are the steps in between. And let's work through them, and each step being, uncomfortable, but not so uncomfortable that you pull away again.
Yeah.
So that's where the support comes in, is having somebody to map out what that looks like. As I said, it's in the book. We talk about graded hierarchies, which work for any specific fear, because you can talk your way through. And, so the first step, just to give you a clue, Jennifer, for the person that I worked with, the first step was drawing cartoon pictures of spiders. So it's not nice, it's not comfortable, but it's something that's tolerable. And then we just step it up from there. But it needs a plan, often needs support. And, again, in the book, I talk about how you may be able to move through this for yourself in all sorts of different areas.
All right.
Can I also say something?
Please.
The other day, I pulled out a pot and there was a big redback who had 3 big eggs. I panicked. I got the fly spray out. I sprayed it. I came back inside and I watched that spider climb back up to her eggs. And then I come inside and cried because I killed her.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, isn't it? It's really just working out what is this fear about, and then what do we want? Because what it sounds like you wanted was for that spider to be okay. So, again, it's really pulling back and kind of going, well, okay, so if this is my fear, how do I want to progress? What is the thing that I want to aim towards, and setting a goal for yourself? But it's so tricky, and that fear is such a strong natural response that your body is designed to do. It's just now we need to use that really clever part of your brain to help you step through.
All right, good luck, Jennifer, with that. Dr. Amy Silver is my guest. The book is called, it's about the loudest guest at your party or in your head. Maybe you don't realise who's making the noise, but Amy reckons it's fear. The loudest guest, how to change and control your relationship with fear. It's available now. Easy to read book, and I'd recommend going to the website dramysilver.com and do the loudest guest quiz, as I did. Just to have the first trick really with all of this is insight, being aware, and then you'll start getting an understanding. You're never going to get yourself better if you don't understand what is actually driving you. So there is a question here. No. Oh, your fear of an animal or object is minor and easy to fix by removing the threat. Fear of society is totally different. Yeah, okay, that's just a passing comment. Thank you, Mike, for that. Amy, I hope that things go well with the book.
Thank you so much.
I'll enjoy it, actually. Your publisher has offered to send one here, so we'll have a look at that.
Very excited.
Yeah, good. It's been selling, rather?
Yes, it's been selling. It's been doing really, really well. Terrific. So that's exciting.
Dr. Amy Silver has been my guest. The loudest guest has been her guest. and mine and all of ours, actually. Good on you, Amy. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
There you go. The book is available now. The Loudest Guest, How to Change and Control Your Relationship with Fear.